The war had dragged on for too long. Queen Varenya stood on the balcony of her command tower, staring out over the city of Lathrine. Once, it had been a shining capital, with towers that touched the clouds and skies filled with peaceful transport ships. Now, black smoke curled from the horizon, and the hum of distant artillery rolled through the air like a storm that never ended. Her empire, the Ellery Dominion, was falling apart. The Dravic swarm had advanced across half her territory in less than a year, burning worlds and enslaving those they conquered. Her fleets were battered, her soldiers exhausted. Food and supplies were running short. Her closest advisors begged her to open peace talks, but Varenya knew the Dravic had no interest in peace. They only destroyed or consumed. Inside the council chamber, the mood was heavy. Commanders argued over maps and casualty reports. General Threx, a broad-shouldered veteran with scars running down his crest, slammed his clawed fist on the table. "We cannot hold much longer. Another week, and the capital will be under siege." "We still have warriors," Varenya said quietly, her voice steady but her heart heavy. "We will fight until the last." "And then?" Threx challenged. "Will you stand alone on the ashes of this city?" The room fell silent. Varenya looked at each of them, her loyal advisors, her friends, people who had served her family for generations. They all carried the same hopeless expression. She knew then that if she did nothing, their world would fall. Her mind drifted to an old promise. Long ago, before she became queen, her mother had told her of a pact made with an alien race from a distant, dangerous world, humans. The galaxy called them Death Worlders, a name born from the fact that their home planet was filled with deadly environments and predators. Most species avoided them. But in the past, when the Alari had faced an invasion, the humans had come to fight alongside them. The alliance had faded over time, but the oath had never been formally broken. "Prepare a long-range transmission," Varenya said suddenly. "To whom?" asked her communications officer, puzzled. "To Earth." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. The idea of calling on humans was risky. They were unpredictable, their methods often reckless, and there was no guarantee they would come at all. But Varenya's mind was made up. Tell them the truth. Tell them the Alari face extinction. Tell them their allies call for aid. Hours later, the message sped through deep space, carried by encrypted hyperspace relays. Light years away, on a human fleet station orbiting Titan, Commander Daniel Cross sat in his dimly lit office, scanning mission reports. Most were routine patrols and minor disputes. Then his screen flickered and the urgent transmission alert appeared. He tapped the control, and the holographic image of Queen Varenya filled the space before him. Her armor was scorched, her eyes weary, but her voice was calm. "Commander Cross, I am Varenya of the Alari Dominion. We are under siege by the Dravic swarm. Our fleets are failing, our cities burn. I call upon the ancient pact between our peoples. If humanity still honors its word, we beg for your aid." The transmission ended, leaving Daniel staring at the dark screen. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. The Dravic were infamous, in human military circles, ruthless, relentless, and nearly impossible to negotiate with. Helping the Alari would mean throwing his ships into one of the most dangerous war zones in the galaxy. Still, Daniel knew the history. The Alari had fought beside humans in their time of need. Their soldiers had died to protect human colonies. The pact was more than a political agreement. It was a matter of honor. Within the hour, he had assembled his command staff in the war room. "This isn't an official operation," Daniel told them. "The Alliance Council won't send forces. But I'm not letting an old ally be wiped out while we sit here." Captain Elena Ward, his second-in-command, nodded. "If we go fast, and we hit hard." Daniel brought up the tactical map. "We'll take the Vanguard, Silverlight, and Horizon. 3 ships, We'll carry enough firepower to break their blockade long enough to get the Queen's forces breathing room. And if the Dravik reinforce, another officer asked. Then we fight until we can't, Daniel said simply. Preparations moved quickly. The human fleet was known for its adaptability. Crews loaded supplies, ran weapons checks, and plotted a hyperspace route that skirted known enemy patrols. By dawn the next day, the ships slipped from Titan's orbit and vanished into the end black. The journey took 2 days. During that time, Daniel reviewed every scrap of intelligence on the Dravik. Their ships were fast but lightly armored. Their greatest strength was overwhelming numbers. Human tactics would have to be sharp and unpredictable to break through. On the 3rd day, the fleet dropped out of hyperspace on the edge of the Illyri capital system. At once, the comms channels filled with frantic chatter. Illyri defense ships were barely holding against a massive Dravik assault. Explosions flared against the dark of space, and burning wrecks drifted like ghosts. Daniel gave the order. All ships form attack pattern Delta. We go in full burn. The human warships surged forward, engines flaring bright. The Dravik didn't expect them. The first salvos tore through enemy formations, scattering fighters and rupturing cruisers. Daniel's voice was calm over the comms, guiding his ships into tight maneuvers that forced the Dravik to break formation. Queen Varenya watched from the command deck of her flagship, disbelief in her eyes. The humans fought like nothing she had seen before, weaving through enemy lines, striking at weak points, ignoring the rigid battle formations most alien fleets relied on. As the Dravik line faltered, Daniel's voice came over her comms. Queen Varenya? Humanity answers the call. Let's push them back. A spark of hope lit in her chest. For the first time in months, the tide had shifted. But deep in the enemy fleet, the Dravik High Command took note of the new arrivals. Cold, voices hissed orders through encrypted channels. The humans would not be allowed to leave this battlefield alive. The war was far from over. In truth, it had only just begun. The battlefield in space was chaos. Explosions tore open the void, casting sharp flashes across the black canvas of the universe. Human and Illyri ships moved in desperate coordination, trading blows with the Dravik swarm. Daniel Cross's fleet had punched a hole in the enemy formation, but it wouldn't stay open for long. Inside the Vanguard's command deck, Daniel stood with his hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the tactical display. Enemy reinforcements were already appearing. At the far edge of the system, the Dravik moved fast, faster than most species could react. We've bought them a window, Captain Elena Ward said, studying her console. But if we hold here, they'll surround us. We're not here to hold, Daniel replied. We're here to break them enough so the Queen can regroup her forces. He tapped the comm link. Queen Varenya, your fleet needs to rally behind our push. The Dravik aren't expecting you to go on the offensive. Varenya's voice came through, steady but urgent. Understood, Commander. We will strike with you. Her flagship, the Sarathis, shifted position, moving to join the human warships. Battered Illyri cruisers and frigates followed, some trailing smoke and flames but still moving forward. Together, they surged through the gap Daniel had made. The Dravik responded with a wave of fighter craft, insect-like ships that darted between the larger vessels. On the Vanguard, gunners tracked them with precise bursts of railgun fire. Human targeting systems locked onto the agile shapes, shredding them before they could reach the larger ships. In the middle of the fight, a sudden warning blared. Commander, the Dravik have deployed siege platforms, an officer reported. Long-range artillery, heavy armor. They're setting up to bombard the capital from orbit. Daniel studied the readouts. The platforms were heavily shielded but slow. If they got into position, the city below would be destroyed. We can't let them fire, Daniel said. All ships break formation. Hit those platforms before they anchor in. The human fleet split into 3 groups. each targeting a siege platform. The Ilari joined the assault, their sleek vessels darting through the enemy lines to cover the humans' flanks. Missile barrages lit up the dark, and one platform exploded in a bright, silent burst. The other two began to retreat, their commanders, realizing the element of surprise was gone. Queen Varenya watched the coordinated assault with growing admiration. Humans didn't fight like the Ilari or any other species she knew. They didn't just follow plans. They adapted in seconds, shifting strategies as if they could see the battle's future. And they were fearless, charging into situations most commanders would call hopeless. By the time the last siege platform was destroyed, the Dravic fleet was in disarray. Their formations broke, and their ships began pulling back toward the far edge of the system. Cheers erupted across Ilari channels. For the first time in months, they had driven the enemy back. But Daniel wasn't celebrating. He knew the Dravic. This wasn't a retreat. It was repositioning. They're falling. Back to regroup, he said to Elena. They'll come again, and harder. His prediction proved true minutes later. Long-range sensors detected a massive incoming force, far larger than the first wave. The Dravic High Command had committed an entire assault armada. Queen Varenya's voice came over the comms again, quieter this time. Commander, our forces are too damaged to face that many. Even with your fleet, we cannot win in open battle. Daniel didn't hesitate. Then we don't fight them in open battle. We change the fight. He sent a coded transmission to Varenya's command deck, outlining his plan. It was risky, and if it failed, both fleets could be destroyed. But it was the only way to even the odds. The idea was simple. Lure the Dravic into the asteroid belt that orbited the system's third planet. The dense rock field would break their formations and make it harder for their numbers to matter. Humans excelled in close, unpredictable fighting, and Varenya's best warriors could use the environment to set traps. Varenya agreed without hesitation. I will send our fastest ships to draw them in. My elites will be ready inside the belt. The preparations began immediately. Ilari frigates darted ahead, firing on the leading edge of the Dravic fleet before pulling back toward the asteroid belt. The Dravic, driven by aggression, pursued without caution. Inside the belt, human and Ilari ships lay in wait. Asteroid shadows hid gunships and heavy cruisers, their engines cold to avoid detection. In the darkness between the rocks, soldiers aboard boarding craft checked weapons and waited for the signal. Daniel stood at the center of the Vanguard's bridge, eyes fixed on the tactical map. Wait for it, he murmured. The first Dravic cruisers entered the belt, weaving through the narrow gaps. Their formation began to stretch and twist as they navigated the maze. That was when Daniel gave the order. All units, engage. The belt erupted with light. Railguns and missile salvos burst from hiding spots, striking the Dravic ships before they could react. Human frigates darted in close, strafing vulnerable hulls. Ilari fighters swarmed like blades of light, cutting through exposed wings. The Dravic tried to regroup, but every turn revealed another ambush. Asteroids, rigged with explosives by Ilari engineers, detonated to scatter their ships. On the Sarathas, Varenya commanded her forces with precision, coordinating with Daniel's fleet like they had fought together for years. The trap worked for a while. But the Dravic numbers were still overwhelming. Even split into smaller groups, they began pressing harder, forcing the Allies to fall back deeper into the belt. Daniel knew they couldn't stay here forever. This buys us time, but it's not enough, he said to Elena. We need a strike that will make them pull back completely. He had one idea, dangerous but decisive. There were whispers among intelligence reports of a Dravic command vessel in the sector. Destroying it would disrupt their control of the entire armada. Daniel opened a secure channel to Varenya. If we can take out their command ship, they'll scatter, but I'll need your best warriors for that. Varenya's answer was immediate. You'll have them, and I will lead them myself. The asteroid belt was still echoing with distant explosions when Daniel Cross and Queen Varenya met aboard the Serathis. The war room was lit by the glow of holographic maps, showing the tangled mess of enemy and allied ships. In the center of the display was a single pulsing red icon, the Dravik command vessel. "This ship controls their entire armada," Daniel said, pointing at it. "Take it out, and the Dravik will lose coordination. They'll fight like scattered raiders, instead of a single war machine." Varenya studied the display. The command ship was deep behind enemy lines, shielded by cruisers and swarms of escorts. "We can't get a fleet through that," she said. "We won't," Daniel replied. "We'll take a small strike team, fast, quiet, and lethal." Varenya's eyes narrowed. "You mean infiltration?" "Exactly," Daniel said. "Your best warriors, my best Marines. We get in, sabotage the core systems, and get out before they realize what's happening." The plan was dangerous. The Dravik were known for brutal close-quarters fighting. Boarding their flagship meant stepping directly into the heart of the swarm. But the alternative was watching the Armada crush the Alari capital within days. "I will lead the Alari half," Varenya decided. "If my people are to risk their lives, their queen will stand with them." By the next cycle, preparations were complete. The strike team was small, 12 humans, 12 Alari elites. Each carried weapons suited to their style, humans with compact rail carbines and explosive charges, Alari with curved plasma blades and precision pistols. The insertion craft was a modified Alari stealth shuttle, stripped of all unnecessary systems to reduce its energy signature. It would slip through the chaos of the asteroid belt, skim the edge of the Dravik formation, and latch on to the command ship's outer hull. Daniel stood beside Varenya in the narrow troop bay as the shuttle's engines thrummed softly. "Once we're in, we split into 2 squads," he reminded the team. "Squad 1 will take the reactor control. Squad 2 handles the communications hub. Without those, the ship's as good as blind and dead." Varenya added, "Remember, speed is survival. Do not get trapped in long fights. We are ghosts until the moment we strike." The shuttle slipped from hiding, weaving through drifting asteroids before cutting into open space. Dravik ships loomed ahead, their jagged, insect-like hulls bristling with weapons. The stealth systems held, for now, masking the shuttle's signature as it crept toward its target. Then, the Dravik command ship filled the viewport. It was enormous, like a floating fortress, with layered armor and spines that pulsed with energy. The pilot guided them in close, using the shadows of the ship's protruding armor plates to hide. With a soft clang, the magnetic clamps engaged, locking them to the hull. "We're in position," the pilot whispered. The strike team moved fast. The airlock hissed open, and humans and Alari slipped into the ship's outer maintenance corridors. The interior was dim, lit by a sickly green glow from the walls. The air smelled metallic, and the low hum of the ship's systems vibrated under their boots. Daniel led Squad 1 toward the reactor section, while Varenya took Squad 2 deeper toward the communications hub. The teams moved like shadows, taking outlone Dravik crew silently with blades or suppressed shots. Near the reactor control, Daniel's squad hit their first serious resistance. A squad of Dravik warriors blocked the corridor, their chitinous armor glinting in the light. The fight was fast and brutal. Railgun bursts shattered armor, while humans used explosive micro-grenades to break defensive formations. Within moments, the corridor was clear, but alarms began to howl. "So much for stealth," Daniel muttered. "Plant the charges." While his Marines set demolition packs on the reactor conduits, Daniel tapped his comm. "Varenya, we've been made. Move fast." In the comm hub, Varenya's team was already in combat. The Dravik crew there fought with desperate fury, protecting the heart of the ship's coordination network. Plasma blades clashed with serrated alien weapons, sparks flashing in the green-lit chamber. Varenya herself cut through 2 attackers. with fluid precision, her movements a deadly dance. When the last defender fell, her warriors quickly planted hacking devices and EMP charges on the massive comm array. "Charges set," one of her elites reported. "Good. Fall back to the rendezvous," she ordered. Daniel's voice came through again. "Reactor charges armed. Timers set for 6 minutes." The retreat turned into a running battle. Dravik. Reinforcements flooded the corridors, forcing the two squads to fight their way back. The humans fired short, controlled bursts, covering the Alari as they darted ahead. In return, the Alari's agility and blade work kept enemies from flanking them. Finally, both squads converged in a wide cargo bay near the hull. The shuttle was already latched onto the outer hatch. "Everyone in, move!" Daniel barked. The team piled aboard, the last Marines firing covering shots as the hatch sealed. The pilot detached them from the ship and powered up the stealth systems, diving toward the cover of the asteroid belt. Behind them, the Dravik command ship loomed larger in the viewport. 5 minutes. 4. 3. The first explosion ripped through. The command ship's lower hull, a brilliant flash of light. A heartbeat later, the secondary blasts from the comm hub detonated, sending fire and debris into the void. The massive vessel began to list, its lights flickering. Varenya watched the destruction silently, her expression unreadable. When the final reactor core went critical, the ship tore apart in a silent, dazzling eruption that lit the battlefield for hundreds of kilometers. As predicted, the Dravik fleet's coordination collapsed almost instantly. Ships broke formation, some retreating, others firing blindly. Daniel exhaled slowly. "That's our opening. Let's make it count." The Allied fleet, still holding inside the asteroid belt, surged forward. Without the command ship, the Dravik couldn't regroup fast enough. Dozens of enemy vessels were destroyed or forced to flee. When the battle ended hours later, the capital system was safe. For now. Back aboard the Sarathis, Varenya turned to Daniel. "Today, humans and Ilari fought as one. Perhaps that is how we will survive this war." Daniel allowed himself a small smile. "Together, we can do more than survive." But both knew the Dravik weren't finished. This victory was only the beginning. The destruction of the Dravik command ship echoed across the system like a thunderclap in deep space. For the first time since the invasion began, the Alari capital world saw clear skies. Citizens gathered in the streets, staring upward as the burning wreckage of the enemy vessel became distant streaks of light. For a moment, hope returned. But Daniel Cross knew the war was not over. Victories like this only made enemies more desperate. Desperate enemies made dangerous moves. On the Vanguard's bridge, reports were pouring in from scout ships patrolling the system's edge. Captain Elena Ward leaned over her console, her brow tight. "Commander, our scouts picked up something unusual." A single Dravik vessel entered the system, heavily shielded, strange energy readings. Then it left almost as quickly as it came. Daniel frowned. "A probe?" "Maybe," Elena said. "But the energy signature matches nothing we've seen before." He didn't like it. The Dravik weren't the type to waste fuel for no reason. "Put the fleet on alert and get a message to the Queen. If the Dravik are testing something, we need to be ready." In the Alari Palace's war chamber, Queen Varenya studied the data. Her advisors whispered theories, a scouting run, a decoy, maybe even a surrender envoy. Varenya shook her head. "No. This was a test. The Dravik do not send envoys. They send threats." Daniel and Varenya met again aboard the Sarathis, this time without the small smiles they'd shared after the last battle. The room was tense. "The Dravik never accept defeat," Daniel said. "If they retreated, it's because they were planning something bigger." Varenya's gaze shifted to the map of her worlds. "The question is where they will strike." The answer came 2 days later. Alarms erupted across the capital system as a massive fleet tore out of hyperspace on the far side of the outermost planet. At its center was a colossal vessel, larger than anything either humans or Elari had faced before. Its hull was black and jagged, like a shard of night ripped from some dead world. Strange pulses of green light ran along its sides. "That's their new weapon," Daniel said grimly, watching the tactical display. "And I don't think it's just a ship. It's a platform, something built to wipe out planets." The Vanguard's sensors confirmed it. The energy signature matched the earlier readings from the mystery ship. Whatever it was carrying, it could channel power in amounts far beyond any known weapon. Varenya wasted no time. "We cannot fight that in open space. If it fires on the capital, the planet will be gone in minutes." Daniel nodded. "Then we hit it before it gets into position, and we don't do it alone." He sent orders to every surviving human and Elari vessel in the system. The message was simple. All available ships, prepare for a coordinated strike. When the fleets formed up, Daniel could see the difference in their posture. This wasn't two separate forces working alongside each other anymore. It was one army. Elari frigates took positions alongside human destroyers, covering each other's flanks. Human fighters carried Elari engineers as passengers, ready to land on damaged allies and repair them mid-battle. As they moved to intercept the Dravik supership, the enemy fleet spread out, screening it from every angle. Heavy cruisers and swarms of fighters advanced like a living wall. "We'll never break through in a straight push," Elena said. "Then we won't," Daniel replied. "We make them think we're going to hit the front, and then we go for the heart." The battle began with a massive exchange of fire. Human warships unleashed long-range railgun volleys, forcing the Dravik screen to tighten. Elari fast attack craft darted in, striking at exposed escorts. The Dravik responded with crushing force, driving the allies back. But that was the plan. While the enemy pressed forward, Daniel's real strike group, a mix of human stealth corvettes and Elari Phantom-class frigates, slipped around the flank, using the debris of old battles as cover. Inside the stealth group, Varenya commanded the lead frigate. Her voice was calm over the comms. "Once we breach their perimeter, we aim for the weapon core. Daniel, your ships will cover our withdrawal." Daniel's voice came back steady. "Understood. Just make sure you survive to withdraw." The flanking group broke through the last layer of escorts, coming face to face with the massive Dravik supership. Up close, it was even more terrifying. The green pulses along its hull were building into a steady glow, the sign of a weapon charging. "We're out of time," Varenya said. "Attack now!" The Phantom-class frigates unleashed concentrated beams at the weapon housing. The stealth corvettes fired volleys of plasma torpedoes. Explosions rippled across the surface of the enemy ship, but the glow only grew brighter. Daniel, watching from the Vanguard, realized what was happening. "They've shielded the weapon separately from the hull. You'll need to overload it from inside." Varenya didn't hesitate. "Then we go in." Her frigate rammed one of the supership's auxiliary hangar doors, tearing it open. Elari, elites and human marines stormed inside, fighting through narrow corridors toward the weapon's power core. The resistance was brutal. Dravik warriors poured into the corridors, their armor reflecting the green light of the charging weapon. Humans fought with tight, coordinated bursts, while Elari fighters moved like water through the chaos, blades cutting where guns could not reach. When they reached the core chamber, the sight was overwhelming. A massive sphere of pulsing energy floated in the center, held by claw-like structures. The air thrummed with raw power. Varenya's voice cut through the comms. "Plan every charge you have!" The teams worked fast, attaching explosives to the support struts and control nodes. As the last charge was armed, the weapon's glow reached its peak. "Time to leave!" Daniel shouted over the comms. The strike team fought their way back to the hangar, with explosions chasing them down the corridors. They barely made it aboard their ships before the core went critical. From the outside, the supership shuddered. Then, with a blinding flash, the weapon section ripped apart, sending debris spinning into the void. The rest of the vessel, crippled and aflame, began to drift. The Dravic fleet, seeing their new weapon destroyed, broke off the attack entirely. They fled into hyperspace, leaving the Allied fleet battered but victorious. On the Sarathas, Varenya stood beside Daniel as the cheers of their crews echoed through the comms channels. "Twice now, your people have turned certain defeat into victory," she said. "I owe you more than words." Daniel shook his head. "You owe me nothing. But we're not done yet. The Dravic will be back, and next time they'll come with something worse." Varenya's eyes hardened. "Then we will be ready. Together." The battle to destroy the Dravic superweapon had left the Allied fleets scarred but unbroken. Repairs were underway across both human and Ilari ships, and for the first time in weeks, the capital world enjoyed a brief period without alarms. But no one believed the quiet would last. In the war chamber aboard the Sarathas, Queen Varenya and Commander Daniel Cross stood over a star map filled with red markers. Each one represented a Dravic stronghold. "If we keep waiting for them to attack, they'll choose the battlefield every time," Daniel said. "We need to take the fight to them." Varenya studied him for a long moment. "You're proposing we strike into Dravic territory?" "Yes," Daniel replied. "Their forces are spread thin after the last battles. If we hit one of their key supply hubs, we can slow their war effort for months." Her gaze drifted to a system on the far side of the map, Korath's Reach, a cluster of moons and asteroids where the Dravic stored fuel, munitions, and repair materials. "Korath's Reach," she said. "It's heavily defended, but you're right. Crippling it would hurt them." "Then that's our target," Daniel confirmed. Preparations took days. The fleet had to be fast enough to strike hard and retreat before the Dravic could send reinforcements. Human engineers worked side by side with Ilari technicians, tuning engines for maximum speed. Soldiers trained together in boarding drills, learning to combine human firepower with Ilari agility. Finally, the strike force was ready. 2 human, cruisers, 3 Ilari war frigates, and a mix of smaller support ships set course for Korath's Reach. As they dropped out of hyperspace, the system spread before them. Jagged moons hanging over a wide asteroid field, and in the center, a sprawling network of docking platforms and cargo stations. Glowing fuel tanks and ammunition silos marked it as a lifeline for the Dravic war effort. But it was also a trap. Almost as soon as the Allied ships appeared, Dravic vessels emerged from hiding among the asteroids. Dozens of cruisers and swarms of fighters surged forward, cutting off the escape route. "They knew we were coming," Captain Elena Ward said over the comms. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then we adapt. Queen, split the fleet. You take the frigates and draw them toward the outer belt. I'll lead the cruisers straight at their supply platforms." Varenya's voice came back calm. "Understood. Do not take too long, Commander." The battle began in a storm of fire. Varenya's frigates darted into the asteroid belt, weaving between drifting rocks to lure half the enemy fleet away. The Dravic pursued aggressively, eager to finish the Queen once and for all. Meanwhile, Daniel's cruisers pushed directly toward the central platforms. Railgun rounds and missile strikes tore into the station's defenses. Human Marines prepared for boarding runs targeting the largest fuel depots. "Alpha Squad on me," Daniel ordered as their dropship launched from the Vanguard. They cut through the chaos of the fight, landing hard on the metal surface of one platform. The air was thick with smoke and the metallic tang of burning fuel. Dravic defenders swarmed in, their chitinous armor gleaming under the platform lights. The Marines met them head-on, firing in short, controlled bursts. Ilari sharpshooters from the Sarathis covered them from a nearby ridge, picking off enemies before they could flank. Inside the main fuel control center, Daniel's team planted explosive charges on the massive storage tanks. One wrong shot could set the entire platform ablaze, so every move had to be precise. As the last charge was set, Elena's voice crackled over the comms. "Commander, Varenya's group is under heavy fire. They're boxed in." Daniel cursed under his breath. "Detonate the charges and pull back to the vanguard. We're going to get them out." The charges went off in a chain reaction. Fireballs, tearing through the supply hub. Shock waves rippled outward, rocking even the ships in orbit. The Dravik forces guarding the station scattered in confusion, and Daniel used the opening to push toward the asteroid belt. In the belt, the fight was brutal. Varenya's frigates had taken heavy damage and debris floated thick in the space around them. The Dravik had used the terrain to pin her forces, cutting off their escape paths with precision. Daniel's cruisers charged in from the flank, hammering the enemy ships with railgun fire. Explosions lit the belt in rapid bursts as the combined fleets fought to break the encirclement. "Commander, we have to move now." Varenya's voice was sharp, but beneath it was the calm resolve of a warrior refusing to break. "Follow us out," Daniel replied. "Stay close to our hulls." The combined human and Elari forces punched through the weakest point in the Dravik formation. Ships on both sides took hits, but the escape corridor widened with every passing second. As the last Allied ship cleared the belt, the Dravik regrouped to pursue, but the destroyed supply hub was already beginning to collapse, debris spreading like shrapnel. The enemy broke off the chase, unwilling to risk their ships in the unstable zone. Safe for the moment, the strike force jumped to hyperspace. Hours later, aboard the Sarathis, Varenya met Daniel in the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly. Before them, quiet and cold. "We destroyed their supply lines," she said, "but at a cost. Too many of our ships will not see another battle." Daniel nodded. "It was a risk we had to take. Without those supplies, they'll slow down, maybe long enough for us to prepare for whatever they throw next." Varenya looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "The Dravik knew we were coming. Someone told them." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You think we have a traitor?" "I think," she said slowly, "that the Dravik are already playing their next move." The return to the Elari capital should have felt like victory, but a shadow hung over both the human and Elari fleets. The destruction of the Dravik supply hub was a major success, yet Queen Varenya and Commander Daniel Cross knew something was wrong. The enemy had been waiting for them at Korath's Reach. Someone had told them. In the palace war chamber, Varenya stood at the head of the long table, her eyes moving from face to face. The room was filled with high-ranking Elari commanders, human officers, and a few trusted advisors. Daniel leaned against the far wall, silent but watchful. "One of us," Varenya began, "has been passing information to the Dravik. They knew our route. They knew our target. We walked into a trap and only survived because of the skill of our people. And luck." The room was tense. No one spoke at first. Then an Elari fleet captain named Calrix stepped forward. "My queen, the traitor could be anyone with access to both human and Elari fleet movements. That narrows the list." Daniel nodded. "That list includes some of us in this room. So here's how we're going to handle this, quietly. We investigate, but we keep the fleet moving like nothing's wrong. If the traitor knows we're looking, they'll hide deeper." Over the next few days, subtle checks began. Ship logs were reviewed. Encrypted transmissions were analyzed. Humans and Elari intelligence agents worked together, pretending to focus on repairs and training while quietly hunting the leak. It was during one of these reviews that Elena Ward, Daniel's second-in-command, found something strange. "Commander," she said, pulling him aside aboard the Vanguard, "we intercepted a transmission 2 hours ago. It was heavily scrambled, routed through civilian convoys, but the origin matches a ship in the Elari fleet, the Valthorin." Daniel's brow tightened. The Valthorin was a mid-sized frigate that had fought bravely in several battles. Its Captain Torvak was an older Elari officer who had served under Varenya for decades. "Tell Varenya," Daniel said. When they confronted the queen, her expression was unreadable. Torvak has been loyal since before I took the throne. But if the evidence points to him, we must know the truth. A quiet boarding operation was arranged. Under the cover of a routine inspection, Daniel, Varenya, and a small security team boarded the Valtharan. The crew was tense as the queen herself walked through the corridors. In the captain's quarters, they found what they were looking for. A hidden transmitter buried inside a bulkhead panel, still warm from recent use. Torvak was brought to the command deck in restraints. His voice was calm as he spoke. I did what I thought was right. The Dravik promised they would spare Ilari civilians if I gave them fleet movements. I never thought they would use it to set a trap. Varenya's tone was cold. You thought you could bargain with monsters. Torvak's eyes lowered. I see now that I was wrong. I will accept whatever judgment you give. Daniel looked at him, then at Varenya. We don't have time for trials. If the Dravik know we've found their informant, they'll move fast to strike again. They were right. Only hours later, long-range sensors picked up a massive Dravik fleet entering hyperspace, and its trajectory was aimed straight at the capital. Varenya gathered her commanders. This will be their final push. They will throw everything they have at us to end this war in one blow. Daniel stepped forward. Then we meet them head-on, before they reach the planet. Humans and Ilari, side by side. No more traps, no more running. We make this the battle they remember. The one they regret. The plan was bold. The Allied fleet would take position at the edge of the system, forcing the Dravik to fight before they could target the planet. The asteroid belt, where the Allies had once set an ambush, would again be their battleground, but this time the Dravik would know they were waiting. As the fleets moved into position, Daniel and Varenya stood together on the Sarathases, observation deck watching the stars. When this is over, Varenya said softly, if we survive, my people will never forget what yours did here. Daniel gave a small smile. Just make sure your historians tell it right. I'd hate for them to leave out how stubborn we are. The Dravik fleet arrived in a wave of black and green, their numbers stretching far into the void. The battle began immediately, the silence of space shattered by the light of thousands of weapons. Human cruisers formed a wall of steel, holding the center while Ilari frigates and fighters struck from the flanks. The Dravik pressed hard, their sheer numbers threatening to crush the Allied line. But every time they broke through, mixed human Ilari strike teams pushed them back. In the middle of the fight, Varenya's voice came over the comms. Daniel, their flagship is moving into the belt. If we take it out, the rest will scatter. Then let's finish this, Daniel replied. Leading a joint squadron, they plunged into the asteroid belt. The Dravik flagship was a monster, bristling with weapons, its hull scarred from past battles. The fight around it was fierce, but the Allies closed in, hammering it from all sides. When its shields finally collapsed, Daniel's voice cut through the comms. All ships, concentrate fire on the core. A storm of railgun slugs, plasma bursts, and missile detonations ripped through the flagship. The final blast tore it apart, fragments spinning away into the black. Across the battlefield, the Dravik began to falter. Leaderless, their formations collapsed, and ships fled in every direction. The war, for now, was over. In the quiet that followed, Varenya looked at Daniel. We stood at the edge of defeat, and you came, not as mercenaries, not as opportunists, but as allies. Daniel nodded. And if you ever call again, we'll come. The Ilari capital was safe. The Dravik had been broken, and somewhere in the endless night of space, the legend of humans, the Death Worlders who answered the call, began to grow.